The recycled air inside Asteroid Mining Station X-7 Thanatos hung thick with the scent of metal, grease, and solitude. Kalen made his way through the dimly lit corridor, the flickering artificial lights casting long shadows on the worn metal walls. The station, once a bustling mining operation at the edge of the Kuiper Belt, had been reduced to a skeleton crew, most functions now handled by aging automated systems that wheezed and groaned like tired old men. As the maintenance engineer, Kalen's job was to keep those systems running, to maintain the bare minimum required for the station to fulfill its diminished purpose. For nearly a decade, he had walked these halls, finding a strange comfort in the predictable rhythms of machinery and the blessed absence of human complications. Today, like every day for the past 8 years, he followed his routine inspection route. The station management, now just a handful of administrators who rarely ventured beyond their offices, didn't care how he spent his time as long as the essential systems kept functioning. This allowed him the freedom to explore forgotten corners of Thanatos, places where the company had decided maintenance wasn't worth the expense. Cargo Bay 7 was one such place. Once used to store valuable minerals extracted from nearby asteroids, it now held only broken equipment and empty containers deemed not worth the fuel to transport back to Earth. Kalen liked the solitude of the abandoned space. Here, among the discarded remnants of the station's more prosperous days, he could think without interruption. The air was colder here, the life support systems set to minimal levels. His breath formed small clouds as he swept his flashlight across the shadows. The beam illuminated dust particles dancing in the air, disturbed by his presence after days, perhaps weeks, of perfect stillness. Kalen paused beside a stack of dented fuel cells. For reasons he couldn't articulate, he developed a habit of talking to the machinery as he worked, a practice that would have earned him concerned glances from the few remaining crew members had they known. "Still here? I see," he murmured to the fuel cells. "Just like me." There was a certain comfort in addressing inanimate objects. They didn't respond with pity or awkward attempts at consolation. They didn't ask about his past or why he'd chosen this isolated existence. They simply existed alongside him, sharing the silent void. Deeper into the bay, Kalen's light fell upon a section he hadn't explored in months. He stepped carefully around a fallen storage rack, the metal corroded from years of neglect. His routine was to check for any dangerous structural issues, then to sit in the quiet for a while before returning to his official duties. Tonight, though, something felt different. The air seemed to carry a subtle electrical charge he couldn't explain. The hairs on his arms stood up beneath his utility jumpsuit, and he found himself moving more cautiously, straining to hear beyond the ambient hum of the station systems. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong among the mechanical whispers of Thanatos. Something soft and irregular, barely audible even in the silence of the abandoned cargo bay. Kalen froze, his hand instinctively moving to the utility knife at his belt. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it offered some reassurance as he angled his flashlight toward the source of the noise. "Hello," he called, his voice sounding strange and hollow in the cavernous space. "Is someone there?" No response came, but the sound continued, a faint, rhythmic rasp that reminded him of labored breathing. He moved forward, guided by the beam of his flashlight and that peculiar sound. Behind a cluster of empty mineral containers, in a corner where shadows gathered thick as cosmic dust, he found the source. At first, he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. The form was humanoid, but clearly not human. Curled into a protective ball, it appeared to be female, though with features unlike any woman Kalen had ever seen. Her skin had a subtle, almost iridescent scale-like quality that shimmered faintly in his flashlight beam. Where human hair would be, fine filaments cascaded from her head, emitting a weak phosphorescent glow. Most striking were her eyes, large, amber-colored, with vertical pupils that contracted sharply when his light found them. Those eyes now stared at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. The creature, the woman, was clearly injured. Dark fluid that might have been blood seeped from a wound on her arm, and her breathing came in shallow, pained gasps. Kalen stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Security protocols dictated that any unauthorized presence on the station should be reported immediately. Unidentified life forms, especially, were to be contained and documented. But as he looked at the injured being before him, those protocols seemed distant and abstract. What he saw wasn't a security threat or a scientific curiosity. He saw a wounded, frightened creature in need of help. The station's management would call in corporate security. They would treat her as a specimen, not a being capable of suffering. They would lock her away, study her, perhaps worse. The thought made something long dormant in Kalen stir, a sense of protectiveness he hadn't felt since. He pushed the memory away. Not now. Slowly, he knelt, placing his flashlight on the floor so it illuminated them both without blinding her sensitive eyes. He raised his empty hands, palms forward, hoping the gesture of peace would translate across species. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, knowing she probably couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone might convey his intent. "You're injured. You need help." The alien woman pressed herself further against the wall, her amber eyes never leaving his face. She made a soft chirping sound that might have been her language or simply an expression of pain. Kalen remained still, giving her time to assess him. After what seemed like ages, her posture relaxed slightly. She extended one slender, six-fingered hand toward him, then withdrew it quickly, as if uncertain. That small gesture decided him. "Protocol be damned. I'm going to take you somewhere safer," he said, slowly reaching into his pocket to retrieve an emergency ration bar. He unwrapped it and placed it on the floor between them, then backed away a few steps. Hunger apparently overcame caution. The alien leaned forward and snatched the bar, sniffing it cautiously before taking a small bite. Finding it acceptable, she devoured the rest with alarming speed. "You're starving," Kalen murmured. "How long have you been hiding here?" Knowing he couldn't leave her in this cold, forgotten place, Kalen made his decision. He would smuggle her to his quarters, tend to her wounds, and figure out the rest later. It was risky. If discovered, he'd likely lose his position, possibly face criminal charges for harboring an unauthorized alien, but he couldn't bring himself to make the official report. He gestured toward himself, then to the door, trying to communicate his intention to move her. The alien watched him warily, but seemed to understand. When he approached again, she allowed him to help her stand. She was lighter than she looked, and alarmingly warm to the touch, like a creature running a high fever. Up close, the phosphorescent filaments that served as her hair emitted a soft, pleasant scent reminiscent of ozone after rainfall. Their journey through the station's back corridors was tense, but mercifully uneventful. The night shift was skeletal, and Kalen knew the patrol routes well enough to avoid them. The alien limped beside him, one arm wrapped around her midsection, the other gripping his jumpsuit for support. When they finally reached his quarters, a sparse but private room granted to him as senior maintenance staff, Kalen locked the door behind them with a sense of both relief and mounting anxiety about what he'd just done. The alien stood in the center of the room, her amber eyes darting around the unfamiliar environment. Her gaze lingered on the small viewport that offered a view of stars and distant asteroids, and something in her posture suggested recognition, perhaps even longing. "Welcome to my home," Kalen said, gesturing around the modest space. "It's not much, but it's safe." He guided her to sit on his bed, then retrieved his emergency medical kit. The alien watched with obvious apprehension as he approached with antiseptic and bandages. "I need to clean your wound," he explained, mimicking cleaning motions on his own arm. "It might sting, but it will help." To his surprise, she seemed to understand. She extended her injured arm. The scales around the wound darkened with what he now confirmed was blood. Dark purple rather than red, but blood nonetheless. As he cleaned the injury, a deep cut that looked like it had come from sharp metal, the alien remained perfectly still, though her breathing quickened. The wound wasn't as dire as he'd feared. The bleeding had mostly stopped, and while it would leave a scar, it didn't appear infected. After bandaging her arm, Kalen offered her water and more ration bars from his personal supply. She accepted both gratefully, consuming them with the careful deliberation of someone making each bite last. With her immediate needs addressed, exhaustion seemed to overtake her. Her luminescent filaments dimmed, and her large eyes began to close despite apparent efforts to stay alert. "You need rest," Kalen said, standing to retrieve a spare blanket from his storage locker. "Take the bed. I'll sleep in the chair." He wasn't sure if she understood his words, but she seemed to comprehend his gesture toward the bed. After a moment's hesitation, she curled onto the narrow mattress, her form so slight she occupied less than half its length. Kalen settled into his desk chair, which reclined just enough to be marginally comfortable for sleeping. He dimmed the lights, but didn't extinguish them completely, not wanting the alien to wake in strange darkness. In the soft glow, he watched her breathing steady into sleep, her iridescent scales catching the dim light. Questions crowded his mind. Who was she? Where had she come from? How had she ended up alone and injured on an isolated mining station at the edge of human territory? More pressingly, what would he do with her? He couldn't keep her hidden in his quarters indefinitely, but the alternatives seemed unthinkable. Corporate would treat her as property, not a person. The scientific community would see her as a specimen. And military intelligence. He didn't even want to consider what they might do. As sleep began to claim him, Kalen realized something unexpected. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The thought should have disturbed him, yet instead it brought a strange comfort as he drifted into uneasy dreams. Morning on Thanatos was an artificial construct, the lights brightening to simulate dawn regardless of the station's position relative to the distant sun. Kalen woke with a stiff neck and momentary confusion at finding himself in the chair rather than his bed. Then he remembered. The alien was sitting cross-legged on his bed, perfectly still, amber eyes fixed on him. In the brighter light, he could see more details of her appearance. Her skin, which he'd thought was scaled, actually bore an intricate pattern of raised ridges that caught the light like mother of pearl. The glowing filaments that served as hair shifted subtly in colors from pale blue to soft violet. She appeared less gaunt than she had the night before, though still clearly undernourished. "Good morning," Kalen said, stretching his cramped muscles. "How's your arm?" The alien tilted her head, clearly not understanding his words. She touched the bandage on her arm and made a soft trilling sound that might have indicated improvement. Kalen nodded, relieved that at least basic communication seemed possible. He pointed to himself. "Kalen," he said clearly. The alien watched intently, then raised a six-fingered hand to her chest. From her throat came a sound unlike any human language, melodic and complex, with tones that seemed to overlap. Kalen tried to repeat it, but knew immediately he'd failed to capture even a fraction of the nuance. The alien's expression, though alien itself, conveyed something remarkably like gentle amusement. "I'm going to need something simpler to call you," he said. "How about?" He thought for a moment, then remembered his favorite constellation, visible from Earth, but not from this distant outpost. "Lyra? Can I call you Lyra?" He pointed to her, then said, "Lyra." The alien considered this, then nodded, pointing to herself and approximating Lyra in a voice that made the simple name sound like a fragment of music. "Good enough," Kalen said with a smile, the expression feeling strangely unfamiliar on his face. How long had it been since he'd genuinely smiled? His work shift wouldn't begin for another 2 hours. Time enough to figure out their immediate needs. Food was the first priority. His ration supply wouldn't last long feeding too. He would need to divert supplies from the station stores. Risky, but necessary. "I have to go to work soon," he told Lyra, miming the action of leaving and returning. "You need to stay here, stay hidden. Understand?" Lyra watched his gestures carefully, then nodded. She seemed to have a remarkable capacity for understanding despite the language barrier. "Good. I'll bring back food. And some clothes." Her own garment, a form-fitting bodysuit of unusual material, was torn and stained. One of his spare jumpsuits would be too large, but better than nothing. Before leaving, Kalen showed her how to use the small bathroom attached to his quarters and demonstrated the emergency signal on his communicator. If there's trouble, press this. I'll come back as fast as I can. He had no idea if she understood, but it was the best he could offer. With a final glance at his unusual guest, Kalen left for his shift, locking the door securely behind him. Throughout the day, as he moved through his maintenance routines, his mind kept returning to Lyra. Each time he passed a security officer or administrator, his heart rate spiked. Had they discovered her? Was his room being searched right now? By the time his shift ended, he'd managed to collect a small cache of supplies. Ration packs from a storage area where inventory was poorly maintained, a medical scanner borrowed from an emergency station, and a spare jumpsuit that had been forgotten in a locker room. He returned to his quarters half expecting to find them empty, or worse, filled with security personnel. Instead, he found Lyra exactly where he'd left her, sitting cross-legged on the bed. She had been busy, though. On the small table beside the bed, she had arranged a series of small objects in a pattern. Bits of wire, screws, and other small items she'd apparently found in his quarters, organized in what appeared to be a geometric design. When she saw him, she gestured toward her creation with obvious pride. "Did you make this?" Kalen asked, examining the intricate arrangement. It reminded him of star charts, though unlike any constellation pattern he recognized. Lyra nodded, pointing upward and making a sweeping gesture with her six-fingered hand, then pointing to the pattern. "Stars," Kalen guessed. "Is this where you're from?" She seemed to consider his question, then shook her head. She touched the pattern, then placed her hand on her chest, over her heart. "Your people? Your culture?" he suggested. This time she nodded, her filaments brightening slightly. Kalen set down his gathered supplies. "I brought food and something clean to wear." He offered her the jumpsuit, which she examined with curious fingers before understanding its purpose. She disappeared into the bathroom, emerging a few minutes later wearing the oversized garment. She had rolled up the sleeves and legs, and though it hung from her slender frame, she appeared comfortable. As she ate the ration packs he provided, with increasing enthusiasm as she discovered which flavor she preferred, Kalen found himself studying her with growing fascination. Despite her alien appearance, her expressions and gestures carried a strange familiarity. Her movements were graceful, deliberate, suggesting a being accustomed to considering her actions carefully. Over the next several days, they developed a routine. Kalen would work his shift, gathering what supplies he could without arousing suspicion, then return to spend his off hours with Lyra. Communication remained difficult, but they gradually built a simple vocabulary of gestures and keywords. Lyra proved to be a quick study, absorbing human language with remarkable speed. Within a week, she could understand simple sentences and respond with basic words, though complex conversation remained beyond reach. More intriguing were the abilities she began to demonstrate as her strength returned. The first indication came when Kalen's quarters experienced a power fluctuation, a common occurrence on the aging station. The lights flickered and dimmed, threatening to fail entirely. Lyra approached the wall panel where the room's electrical controls were housed. She placed her six-fingered hand against it and closed her eyes in concentration. To Kalen's astonishment, the flickering stopped. The lights not only stabilized, but seemed to grow brighter, more steady than they had been in years. "How did you do that?" he asked, staring at the panel, then at her. Lyra struggled to explain, her limited vocabulary insufficient. She pointed to her chest, then to the panel, making a flowing motion with her hands. "Energy," she finally said, one of the new words she had learned. "I feel. I help." Over the following days, she demonstrated similar abilities with other systems, stabilizing the temperature controls when they malfunctioned, inexplicably improving the efficiency of his personal water purifier, even somehow enhancing the clarity of his private viewport, removing years of accumulated cosmic dust without physically touching the exterior. Kalen began to understand that Lyra possessed some innate connection to energy and technology, a symbiotic relationship he couldn't fully comprehend but found increasingly valuable. When a crucial life support system in his section began to fail, he risked bringing her to the maintenance access point after hours. Her touch restored functionality that would have required days of repairs and replacement parts he didn't have. But beyond her practical abilities, Kalen found himself valuing her presence for entirely different reasons. The silence of his quarters, once a refuge, had become something richer. They would sit together in the evenings, she creating intricate patterns with whatever material she could find, reading technical manuals or rare downloaded books. Occasionally, she would ask about something she had observed, pointing to an image or object and waiting for him to provide the word. Each new term she greeted with delight, repeating it until her pronunciation was nearly perfect. One evening, as they shared this comfortable silence, Lyra approached where he sat reading and touched his cheek gently. The contact sent a strange, pleasant warmth through him. "Sad," she said, her amber eyes studying his face with concern. "Why sad?" Kalen hadn't realized his expression had revealed anything. He'd grown so accustomed to his solitude that he'd forgotten how transparent emotions could be to another being. "Old memories," he said simply, not expecting her to understand. But she nodded, her filaments dimming slightly. "Loss," she said, surprising him with the complex word. "I understand loss." She placed her hand over his heart, and through some means he couldn't explain, Kalen felt a gentle easing of the old ache he carried. Not healing, not forgetting, but a sharing of the burden. That night, as she slept and he watched the stars through the viewport, Kalen acknowledged a truth he'd been avoiding. Lyra had become important to him. Her safety mattered. Her happiness mattered. The realization was terrifying. Attachment meant vulnerability, the possibility of loss, of pain. He had come to Thanatos specifically to avoid such risks. Yet as he watched the soft rise and fall of her chest, the gentle pulsing of her luminescent filaments, he knew he would protect her, whatever the cost. The relative peace they had established shattered 3 weeks after Lyra's arrival. Kalen was midway through his shift when the station's proximity alarm sounded. An unscheduled vessel was approaching Thanatos, not the regular supply ship, which wasn't due for another month, but a sleek corporate security cruiser. Cold dread settled in Kalen's stomach. There was no legitimate reason for such a ship to visit their remote outpost. Had someone discovered Lyra? Had he been reported? He waited anxiously as the station manager greeted the new arrivals. Through the grapevine of maintenance staff, he learned they were a private security team, ostensibly conducting an inventory audit of outer stations. But their equipment, weapons barely concealed beneath civilian attire, advanced scanning devices, suggested a different purpose. When his shift ended, Kalen hurried back to his quarters, taking a circuitous route to avoid the security team. He found Lyra standing by the viewport, her posture tense, filaments pulsing with an agitated rhythm. "They come for me," she said without turning, her vocabulary having expanded dramatically in recent days. "You know them?" Kalen asked, surprised. She turned, her amber eyes darker than usual. "Not them. They're masters. I was experiment. I escaped." The pieces fell into place. Lyra wasn't just a lost alien visitor. She was a fugitive. Someone had been studying her, perhaps exploiting her unique abilities. And now they had tracked her to Thanatos. "We need to hide you somewhere else," Kalen said, mind racing through the station's layout. "My quarters will be one of the first places they search." "Too late," Lyra replied, pointing to the door. "They scan. Soon find." As if to confirm her words, Kalen's communication device pinged with an all-staff alert. Mandatory quarters inspection, ostensibly for contraband materials. They had minutes at most. The old mining tunnels, Kalen decided suddenly. Section 12. They've been closed for years. The radiation interferes with scanners. If we can get there. He grabbed an emergency pack he prepared for just such a contingency, filled with rations and basic medical supplies. "We need to go. Now." They slipped into the corridor, Lyra wearing Kalen's spare hooded jacket to conceal her alien features. The station was in evening mode, the lighting dimmed, which worked to their advantage. They moved quickly through the maintenance passages, avoiding the main corridors where the security team would be operating. They had nearly reached the access point to Section 12 when disaster struck. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with two members of the security team, armed with both weapons and scanning devices. Kalen Mercer, one of them asked, consulting a tablet. "We need to inspect your quarters. Why are you in this section?" "Maintenance call," Kalen replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Environmental system fluctuation." The guard scanner beeped as it registered Lyra's presence. His eyes narrowed. "Remove your hood," he ordered, hand moving to his weapon. Kalen stepped between them. "Run," he told Lyra. Section 12. "Go." What happened next occurred with disorienting speed. Lyra raised her hand, and the corridor lights surged blindingly bright before exploding in a shower of sparks. The guard's electronic equipment emitted high-pitched squeals, the screens cracking. In the confusion, Kalen grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the access hatch. Behind them, he heard shouts and the crackle of communication devices as the alarm was raised. They raced through the hatch and sealed it behind them, Lyra somehow fusing the electronic lock with a touch. The old mining tunnels stretched before them, dimly lit by emergency lighting that had remained functional despite years of neglect. "This way," Kalen urged, leading her deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels. The air grew colder, the distant rumble of the station's systems fading behind them. After nearly an hour of navigation through the twisting passageways, they reached an abandoned control room, once used to monitor the extraction operations. Dust covered the consoles, and the viewport looked out on a cavernous excavation chamber, the mining equipment sitting idle like great metal beasts frozen in time. "We should be safe here, at least temporarily," Kalen said, catching his breath. The radiation from the old equipment scrambles most scanning technology. Lyra touched one of the consoles, and to Kalen's surprise, forgotten screens flickered to life, casting a pale blue glow over her features. "They will not stop," she said, her voice carrying a new weight. "They value what I am, what I can do." "Who are they?" Kalen asked. "What do they want with you?" Lyra's filaments dimmed as she considered how to explain. "My people. We live with energy. We feel it, shape it, grow with it. Some of us. Special." She touched her chest. "I am special. I can join with technology, make it more." She gestured to the now-functioning console. "Your kind found my ship, damaged in space storm. They took me to a place of metal and machines. Many tests. They wanted to use me to make weapons, to control energy in ways that hurt." Kalen felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "You escaped." She nodded. "Found small ship. Fled. Ship damaged again. Found your station. Hid. Then you found me. And now they've tracked you here," Kalen concluded. "But how?" "Your ship. Beacon," Lyra said, touching her bandaged arm. "Inside. I could not remove." Kalen stared at her. "You have a tracking device implanted in your arm? Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought. Broken in escape. But they fixed. Made better." Her amber eyes met his. "I am sorry, Kalen. I bring danger to you." Before he could respond, the distant sound of the access hatch being forced open echoed through the tunnels. The security team had breached their first line of defense. "We need to keep moving," Kalen said. "There's an emergency shuttle bay in Section 14. If we can reach it." "No," Lyra interrupted, her expression resolved. "Running only delays. They will follow. Always follow." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the bandaged area on her arm. "Remove beacon. Then we fight." Kalen balked. "I'm not a surgeon. I could damage your arm permanently." "Better damaged arm than captured," she replied with simple logic. "You have tool." She pointed to his utility knife. With extreme reluctance, Kalen retrieved the medical scanner he'd stolen, using it to locate the foreign object embedded in Lyra's arm, a sophisticated device no larger than a grain of rice. Using his knife, sterilized over a small flame, and with Lyra guiding him with her ability to sense the energy fields, he managed to extract the beacon. As soon as it was free, Lyra crushed it between her fingers, the device sparking and dying with a faint whine. "They still come," she said, "but now cannot track precisely. The sound of pursuit had grown closer. Heavy footsteps and the hum of scanning equipment echoed through the tunnels. "We need a plan," Kalen said. "We can't outrun them forever, and I'm not leaving you." Lyra touched the console again, her filaments brightening as she communed with the ancient system. Screens flickered rapidly, displaying schematics and data streams too fast for Kalen to follow. "Found something," she said finally. "Old defense system. For asteroid impacts. Still functional. I can redirect." Kalen understood. "You want to use the station's defense systems against their ship?" She nodded. "Disable only. Not destroy. Create chance to escape. It was their best option, perhaps their only one." "What do you need from me?" "Protect me while I work," she said. "Takes time to understand system. Control it. They will find us before finished." Kalen surveyed the control room. The single entrance could be barricaded, and the old equipment might provide some cover. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As Lyra immersed herself in communion with the ancient systems, Kalen prepared their defenses. He dragged heavy equipment to partially block the entrance and found an old mining tool that could serve as a makeshift weapon. The pursuers were drawing closer. Kalen could hear them methodically searching each branch of the tunnels. He estimated they had minutes at most. Lyra worked with intense concentration, her filaments glowing brighter than he'd ever seen, casting the control room in ethereal light. The consoles responded to her touch, systems long dormant coming back to life under her guidance. The first security team member appeared at the partially blocked entrance. "Found them!" he shouted into his communicator before raising his weapon. Kalen swung the mining tool, knocking the weapon aside. The man retreated momentarily, calling for backup. "How much longer?" Kalen asked, bracing himself for the coming assault. "Almost." "Connected," Lyra replied, her voice strained with effort. The security team regrouped, now 4 strong at the entrance. They began methodically removing the barricade Kalen had constructed. "Surrender the asset," their leader demanded, a tall man with cold eyes and a voice devoid of emotion. "Interference with corporate property is a criminal offense." "She's not property," Kalen shouted back. "She's a living being." The man's expression didn't change. "The specimen is valuable research material, legally salvaged from interstellar territory. Stand aside, or face severe consequences." They had breached enough of the barricade to begin entering the control room. Kalen stood his ground, though he knew he couldn't hold them off for long. The first guard rushed him. Kalen swung his improvised weapon, connecting with the man's shoulder. But the second guard was right behind, tackling Kalen to the ground. Pain exploded in his side as a third guard kicked him. Through the struggle, he heard Lyra cry out, not in fear, but in triumph. "Connected." The entire station shuddered as ancient defense systems activated. Alarms blared, and the security team's communicators erupted with panicked voices reporting that their ship was under attack from the station's asteroid defense cannons. The leader cursed, signaling his men to fall back and deal with the threat to their vessel. As they retreated, Kalen struggled to his feet, ribs aching where he'd been kicked. Lyra rushed to his side, supporting him. "You are injured," she said, concern flooding her voice. "I'll be all right," Kalen assured her, though each breath sent pain shooting through his chest. "We need to move while they're distracted." Lyra shook her head, placing her 6-fingered hand gently over his injured ribs. A strange warmth spread from her touch, and a sharp pain subsided to a dull ache. "I cannot heal," she explained, "but can ease pain, help body heal faster." "Thank you," Kalen said, amazed once again by her abilities. "What about their ship?" "Disabled engines only," she replied. "Cannot leave for many hours." "Gives us time." "Time for what?" Kalen asked. "They'll regroup and come after us again." Lyra's expression grew determined. "We take ship." "Take their ship," Kalen repeated, incredulous. "There are at least 8 of them, all armed. They split up. Some here, some at ship," Lyra explained. "Ship needs repair. Few guards. I can't." Confused systems create distraction. It was audacious, perhaps impossible, but Kalen saw no better alternative. They couldn't remain on Thanatos. Even if they evaded this security team, others would come. All right, he agreed. Let's steal a ship. Moving stealthily through the tunnels, they made their way toward an emergency airlock that would allow them to access the exterior of the station. From there, they could reach the docking bay where the security vessel was tethered. The station continued to reverberate with alarms and emergency announcements as Systems Lyra had triggered cause control chaos. Most of the regular crew would be occupied with standard emergency procedures, and the security team was divided between pursuing them and protecting their disabled ship. At the airlock, they donned emergency exposure suits. Lyra's alien physiology seemed capable of tolerating the vacuum for short periods, but Kalen insisted she wear protection anyway. The exterior route would be dangerous, exposed to space with only magnetic boots to keep them anchored to the station's hull, but avoided the heavily monitored interior corridors. Their progress across the station's outer skin was painstakingly slow. Kalen led the way, having performed exterior maintenance countless times, guiding Lyra through the unfamiliar environment. Stars surrounded them, brilliantly clear without atmospheric interference, and the distant sun appeared as just another bright point in the vastness. They reached the docking bay access hatch without incident. Lyra placed her hand against the external control panel, and Kalen watched in amazement as the security locks yielded to her touch, the hatch cycling open to admit them. Inside the maintenance corridor adjacent to the docking bay, they removed their exposure suits. Kalen peeked through a viewport into the bay itself. The security vessel sat on the landing pad, its sleek form marred by scorch marks from the defense system's attack. 2 guards stood at the entry ramp, while others could be seen inside through illuminated ports, presumably working on repairs. "I count at least 4, Kalen whispered. "Maybe more inside." Lyra nodded, her expression concentrated. "I will create confusion. When they distracted, we move." She placed her hands against a nearby control panel. Her filaments began to pulse rapidly, and Kalen felt the slight charge in the air that always accompanied her use of her abilities. Throughout the docking bay, systems began to malfunction. Loading equipment activated randomly. Emergency lights flashed in seizure-inducing patterns, and the bay's atmospheric controls began cycling, creating gusts of wind and pressure changes. The guards reacted with confusion, attempting to communicate with their comrades about the new malfunctions. Lyra intensified her efforts, and the ship itself began to respond. Access ramps extending and retracting, external lights blinking in chaotic sequences, airlock doors cycling open and closed. "Now," she said, pulling back from the panel, her filaments dimmed with exertion. They rushed into the chaos of the docking bay. The guards, disoriented by the malfunctioning equipment and concerned about their vessel's erratic behavior, failed to notice them immediately. When one finally spotted them and raised his weapon, Lyra extended her hand, and the weapon's power cell overloaded, forcing the guard to drop it with a cry of pain. They sprinted for the ship's access ramp. A guard emerged from inside, alerted by the commotion, but Kalen was ready. Using the momentum of their charge, he tackled the man, sending them both to the floor of the ramp. They struggled briefly before Kalen landed a solid blow that left the guard stunned. Lyra had already entered the ship. As Kalen followed, he heard shouts behind them. The other security team members had been alerted and were converging on the docking bay. Inside the ship, Lyra moved with surprising confidence toward the control room. 2 technicians working on repairs looked up in shock as they entered. Before they could react, Lyra touched a control panel, and the internal doors sealed, separating the technicians from the cockpit. "You know how to fly this thing?" Kalen asked, staring at the advanced controls. "No," Lyra admitted, "but ship knows how to fly itself. I will. Speak to it." She placed her hands on the main console, her filaments brightening to an almost painful intensity. The ship's systems responded instantly, displays illuminating, engines humming to life despite the damage they had sustained. Through the viewport, Kalen saw the security team attempting to override the docking bay doors, which remained stubbornly closed under Lyra's influence. "They're trying to trap us," he warned. "Not trapped," Lyra replied, her voice strained with concentration. "Watch." The ship rose shakily from the landing pad, hovering several meters above the deck. Then, to Kalen's astonishment, Lyra directed the vessel not toward the docking bay doors, but toward the maintenance access hatch they had used to enter. Much smaller, but just barely large enough for the sleek security vessel. "That's going to be tight," he observed, bracing himself. Lyra didn't respond. All her attention focused on guiding the ship. With precision that would have been impossible for a human pilot, she navigated the vessel through the narrow hatch, shearing off a communication array on the ship's exterior but keeping the essential hull intact. They were out, free of Thanatos, surrounded by the star-filled void. Before the security team could organize a pursuit, Lyra engaged the ship's FTL drive. The stars blurred, and Thanatos disappeared behind them as they leapt into faster-than-light travel. Only then did Lyra relax her communion with the ship's systems, her filaments dimming to their normal soft glow. She slumped in the pilot's seat, clearly exhausted by the extended use of her abilities. "You did it," Kalen said, still hardly believing their escape. "Where are we headed?" Lyra gestured vaguely. "Away. Safe distance first. Then, decide." Kalen nodded, understanding the wisdom of putting substantial distance between themselves and their pursuers before determining a long-term plan. He helped Lyra to a crew rest area, where she immediately curled up, her body's need for recovery overriding everything else. As she drifted into sleep, her six-fingered hand found his, gripping it with surprising strength. "Thank you," she murmured, "for finding me, for helping." Kalen squeezed her hand gently. "Rest now. We're safe." As Lyra slept, Kalen explored the ship. It was a state-of-the-art corporate security vessel, well-equipped, and, despite the damage from their escape, still highly functional. The technicians they had locked out of the control room were secured in a storage compartment, unarmed and unable to interfere. Hours later, when Lyra awoke, they gathered in the ship's small mess area to discuss their situation. "The ship's computer says we're at the edge of the Epsilon sector," Kalen informed her, "far from any major trade routes or settlements. We should be safe for now, but we need a plan. They'll be looking for this ship." Lyra nodded, her strength visibly restored after a rest. "Need new ship. This one." She touched the wall, communing briefly with the vessel. "Has trackers. Many trackers. Can you disable them?" "Some yes. Some no. Hidden too deep in systems." Kalen considered their options. "We could head for the outer colonies. There are independent settlements there, places where questions aren't asked as long as you have something to trade." "And we trade this ship," Lyra suggested, understanding his thinking. "Exactly. We find someone who wants advanced corporate technology and doesn't care where it came from. We trade for a clean vessel and supplies." It was a plan fraught with risk, but it was the best they had. Lyra plotted a course for Persephone, a frontier colony known for its robust black market and anti-corporate sentiment. During the journey, which would take several days at their reduced speed, Lyra had deemed it safer to avoid maximum FTL, which might strain the damaged engines. They settled into a new routine. Kalen maintained the ship's essential systems while Lyra communed with its more advanced technology, gradually learning its capabilities and occasionally coaxing better performance from the damaged components. They also continued their language lessons, Lyra's vocabulary expanding rapidly. As her command of human language grew, she began to share more about her people and culture. "My kind," she explained one evening as they shared a meal of the ship's emergency rations, "live in harmony with technology. Not separate like humans. We see energy, feel it like you feel air or water. Is that why you can interact with machines the way you do?" Kalen asked. She nodded. "All my people can communicate with technology. But few can join as I do." She seemed hesitant, then added, "I am what my people call synastery, one who can bond completely with mechanical systems, become one with them temporarily." "That's why they wanted you," Kalen realized. "The corporation. They wanted to use your abilities." "Yes, to make weapons stronger, to control systems no human can touch." Her filaments dimmed with sadness. They did not ask. They took. Kalen felt renewed anger at what had been done to her. They had no right. Your law says they did, Lyra replied. I was not human, not person to them. Just property. That's not how I see you, Kalen said quietly. Lyra's amber eyes studied him intently. I know. That is why I trust you. She seemed to search for the right word. Why I stay with you. The journey continued, their bond deepening with each passing day. Kalen found himself sharing stories of his past, his childhood on Earth, his career as an engineer, and eventually, the tragedy that had driven him to seek isolation on Thanatos, the loss of his wife and daughter in a transport accident 7 years earlier. Lyra listened with quiet empathy, offering not empty consolation, but simple understanding. She shared her own losses, separation from her people, the violation of being treated as an experimental subject, the fear of never finding a place of safety again. In their shared exile, they found unexpected comfort. On the 4th day of their journey, they encountered a complication. The ship's long-range scanners detected a corporate patrol vessel on an intercept course. Not yet close enough to detect them, but following a trajectory that would bring them into sensor range within hours. They're searching the route to Persephone, Kalen concluded, studying the tactical display. They've guessed our destination. Lyra placed her hand on the console, communing with the ship's systems. Can alter course, but engine's damaged. New course uses more power. Do we have enough to reach an alternative destination? She considered. Perhaps. Not certain. They had little choice. Remaining on their current course would lead to certain capture. Lyra programmed a new destination, a small mining outpost called Demeter, less ideal than Persephone, but hopefully beyond the corporate search grid. The course change strained the already damaged engines. Warning indicators flashed across the control panels as the FTL drive struggled to maintain stability. Lyra remained in constant communion with the ship's systems, coaxing, adjusting, balancing energy flows in ways Kalen could only marvel at. Can you keep us together until we reach Demeter? He asked, monitoring the alarming power fluctuations. Trying, she replied, her filaments pulsing with the effort of maintaining the delicate balance. Ship wants to help. Feels alive in way, but hurt badly. The journey became a tense marathon, with Lyra's abilities the only thing keeping them from a catastrophic drive failure in the emptiness between systems. Kalen supported her as best he could, handling manual systems and ensuring she had nutrition and rest when possible, though she refused to break her communion with the ship for more than brief intervals. After 36 grueling hours, the mining outpost Demeter appeared on their sensors, a collection of habitats and processing facilities orbiting a resource-rich asteroid. Unlike Thanatos, Demeter was a thriving operation, with regular traffic from independent traders and transport vessels. We made it, Kalen said, relief evident in his voice. Now we just need to find a buyer for this ship, preferably someone who won't ask too many questions. Lyra finally released her connection to the ship's systems. Her filaments dimmed to an exhausted flicker. Ship will not last much longer, she observed. Drive core unstable. All the more reason to make a quick deal, Kalen replied. Are you all right? You've been connected for a long time. Tired, she admitted, but we'll recover. They approached Demeter cautiously, using forged identification codes Lyra had extracted from the ship's database. To their relief, the outpost traffic control accepted their credentials without question, one anonymous vessel among many in a busy mining hub. They docked at a commercial bay, paying the fee with credits from the ship's emergency fund. Before disembarking, they addressed the matter of the 2 technicians still confined in the storage compartment. We can't take them with us, and we can't just leave them on the ship if the drive core is unstable, Kalen said. We'll alert station security, Lyra agreed. Anonymous message. After we gone. It wasn't ideal, but it ensured the technicians wouldn't be harmed while also giving Kalen and Lyra time to disappear into the outpost population. Demeter proved to be a chaotic, bustling place, filled with miners, traders, and support personnel from across the human sphere. Lyra attracted curious glances, but in an outpost accustomed to various environmental adaptations and genetic modifications, her alien appearance didn't cause the stir Kalen had feared. They found lodging in a cheap residential section, using more of the ship's credits. Then, through careful inquiries in the outpost's less reputable establishments, Kalen made contact with a broker who specialized in discretionary acquisitions, starships with complicated histories. The broker, a sharp-eyed woman with extensive cybernetic enhancements, agreed to examine their vessel. Her inspection was thorough, and her assessment blunt. "Drive course shot to hell," she told them in her cramped office. "Wouldn't trust it for another jump. But the weapons systems, shields, and navigation computer are top-tier corporate security grade. I can move those components for a good price." "We need a ship," Kalen explained. "Something reliable, unregistered." The broker tapped her metal fingers on the desk. "I might have something. Old exploration vessel, retrofitted for independent operations. Not pretty, not fast, but solid and off the books." After negotiations that stretched into the station's artificial night, they struck a deal. The broker would take the security vessel for parts, and in exchange, they would receive the exploration ship, plus a modest sum of credits for supplies. 2 days later, they took possession of their new vessel, the Horizon, an aging but sturdy ship designed for extended operations in uncharted space. Its previous owners had modified it extensively, adding improved life support, expanded cargo capacity, and better shielding. As Lyra explored the ship, her filaments brightened with approval. "Good ship," she declared. "Honest ship. Has been. Love." Kalen understood what she meant. Unlike the sleek, cold efficiency of the corporate vessel, the Horizon had character. The marks of people who had lived aboard her, cared for her, treated her as more than just a machine. They stocked the ship with supplies, spending their remaining credits on essentials for what might be a long journey. The question of destination remained unresolved until their final night on Demeter. "Where should we go?" Kalen asked as they sat in the Horizon's compact common area, surrounded by storage crates and equipment. "We could try for the outer colonies again, or head toward the independent territories." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes focused on the viewport where Demeter's lights glowed against the darkness of space. "You're home," she suggested finally. "Earth?" Kalen shook his head. "Too risky. Corporate influence is strongest in the inner systems. And," he hesitated, "there's nothing for me there anymore." Lyra considered this. "My home too far. Beyond your maps." She touched his hand with her 6 fingers. "Perhaps. Find new home. Together." The simplicity of her suggestion struck Kalen with unexpected force. A new home, not a hiding place, not a temporary refuge, but somewhere they could belong. "Together," he agreed, turning his hand to intertwine his fingers with hers, the strange configuration somehow feeling entirely natural. The next morning, they departed Demeter, their destination set for a region known as the Crossroads, a cluster of systems at the intersection of several territorial boundaries, known for their diverse settlements and relative independence from corporate control. Life aboard the Horizon quickly settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ship, while lacking the advanced technology of the security vessel, responded well to Lyra's touch. She formed a bond with its systems, enhancing its efficiency and reliability through her unique abilities. They established a division of responsibilities, Kalen handling mechanical maintenance and navigation, Lyra managing the environmental systems and communications. Together, they transformed the utilitarian vessel into a home, rearranging living spaces and personalizing their quarters. Lyra continued to create her intricate arrangements of objects, star charts of her homeworld, patterns representing concepts from her culture, beautiful abstractions that defied human categorization. Kalen found space on the walls to display them, turning the common area into a gallery of interstellar art. As weeks passed in the vastness between systems, their relationship evolved. The barriers of species and language gradually dissolved, replaced by a deep understanding that transcended conventional communication. They learned each other's habits, preferences, and needs through daily interaction, developing a seamless partnership. One evening, as they sat together in the observation dome Kalen had retrofitted from an old sensor array, watching the stars streak by an FTL, Lyra placed her hand over his heart, a gesture that had become familiar between them, her way of sharing emotions too complex for words. "Home," she said simply. Kalen glanced around, thinking she meant the ship, but her amber eyes were fixed on him. "You," she clarified. "You are home." Understanding dawned, bringing with it a warmth he had thought lost forever. He placed his hand over hers. "And you are mine," he replied. When they reached the Crossroads region 3 months after their escape from Thanatos, they visited several settlements before finding one that felt right, a small, independent colony called Nova Haven, established on a terraformed moon orbiting a gas giant. The community welcomed those seeking a fresh start and asked few questions about their past. Using their remaining credits and trading Kalen's engineering skills, they acquired a small dwelling on the outskirts of the main settlement. The structure was basic but solid, with enough land around it to expand if they chose. Most importantly, it offered a clear view of the stars through the colony's protective dome. Lyra's abilities proved valuable to the colony. Her natural affinity for technology made her an ideal systems technician for the environmental controls that kept the settlement habitable. The colonists, many themselves refugees from corporate dominance or planetary disasters, accepted her alien nature with minimal curiosity. They lived quietly, building their new life day by day. Kalen found purpose in maintaining critical infrastructure, while Lyra created interfaces between human technology and the moon's natural systems that improved efficiency beyond what conventional engineering could achieve. Occasionally, news would reach them of corporate security operations in nearby systems, searching for stolen property, a reminder that they could never completely lower their guard. But as months turned into years, the intensity of the search diminished. They became simply another couple in a frontier colony, their unusual background fading into the tapestry of diverse stories that made up Nova Haven. On the 3rd anniversary of their arrival, they stood together on the small observation platform they had built atop their expanded dwelling. The gas giant filled half the sky, its swirling storms casting a golden glow over the landscape. Stars populated the remaining expanse, including one distant point of light that Lyra had identified as the general direction of her homeworld. "Do you ever regret it?" Kalen asked. "Leaving your people? Ending up here with me?" Lyra considered the question with her characteristic thoughtfulness. Her filaments, which now moved more expressively as she had grown comfortable revealing her true nature, rippled in gentle patterns. "No regrets," she said finally, her command of human language now nearly perfect, though she retained a melodic quality that marked her alien origin. "Found more than lost." She turned to face him, placing one 6-finger hand over his heart and the other over her own, their private gesture of connection. "In my language," she said, "there is a word, Kaliastri. It means one who walks beside you through the darkness of space, who shares your air, who sees the stars through your eyes, and shows you stars you cannot see alone." She smiled. "Your word husband is close. Not the same, but close." Kalen covered her hand with his own. "Then I am honored to be your Kaliastri." "And I yours," she replied. Then, with the hint of humor she had developed during their years together, she added, "But husband is easier for neighbors to understand." As night fully embraced Nova Haven, they remained on their observation platform, two beings from different worlds who had found in each other something neither had expected, not just shelter from those who would harm them, not just companionship in the vastness of space, but a profound belonging that transcended the boundaries of species and origin. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, witnessing the quiet miracle of connection across the seemingly insurmountable divide of different evolutions, different biologies, different worlds. In each other's eyes, they had found home.